ruffle and binding is done on both sides. Now we're ready for the zipper. I mentioned before my zipper is much larger than I need it to be lengthwise. So if yours is shorter, it needs to at least be longer than your bag. So it needs to at least be longer than the bag. We're going to work one side at a time, and I'm going to leave the zipper zipped. This might be hard to show on camera just because I need to get at an angle where I can see it well. But what you want to do is you're going to use straight pins, and you're just putting the zipper underneath. Like, this is how the zipper will look in the bag on the one side. And we'll put a pin in. That is pinned the best I can tell. I may adjust it a little off camera just when I can look at it a little more up close. But I've got that pinned to my bag. Zipper still seems fine. And I am ready to attach it at my sewing machine. Swapped out my machine again, and I have a zipper foot on. Every sewing machine is different what the zipper foot looks like. In this case, I'm using a 1D foot from Bernina, which is the foot for my machine. So just use the foot for your machine. Don't use the same foot as mine if it's not the right one for your machine. What you want to do is your needle goes back and forth. There's somewhere on your machine an adjustment that goes back and forth. So I'm adjusting my needle to the right, and I want to sew as close as I can to the folded edge of this bound piece of fabric. So I am 4 clicks over. And the zipper is stitched in place. You can see on the back, the zipper will show on the inside of the pouch, but the edge is finished. If you bought one of those really pretty lace trim zippers that you just sew on the top, that would also be beautiful on this project. You might have to try that, make one like that next. We're ready to do the same thing on the other side of the zipper, so let me show you how to do that so that you know that everything lines up correctly. What you want to do is bring your pouch together with the zipper in the center. Again, I'm just going to do a test. Okay, we're still working. Because what you don't want is you don't want it to go like this. Like, I mean, I'm exaggerating it, but you want to make sure that you're straight side to side. So I am going to take a second and trim these edges even so I can see them a little better. Start either on the top or the bottom. I'm going to start on the bottom. And pin this in place. So another thing you can do to help you out a little bit, which I'll take this off and do that, is use a marking pen. Now I know this is straight. I'm going to use a pen and I'm going to draw a straight line right here. So I know that is the bottom of the zipper. And I know this should be the top of my zipper. Now, just to make things a little simpler, I can unzip the zipper and pin. It's going to be a little easier for me to pin this way too. Go to my machine and sew it in place. Alright, that's sewn. I'm gonna test it again. I know you probably think I'm crazy for testing the zipper so many times, but I have many times sewn a bag like this and the zipper has been wrong. So it looks good. I don't have my edges trimmed even because I forgot to trim this ruffle first, but it is straight, back and forth. Very happy with that. Now you'll notice my zipper is way too long. So what I'm going to do now, and when you do this, make sure these zipper pulls stay in the middle. I don't know if you want to pin them, safety pin them together or whatever, but if you pull them apart, you're going to have to rethread your zipper. So I am just going to come in with my scissors. I'm going to trim all of these layers even and just cut off the end of the zipper like so. So that is that zipper. Just treated it like it was a piece of fabric. On this end, it looks like we're a little off square, so I'm going to trim it and straighten it up at the same time. Okay. All right, so now you have essentially a tube that is ready to be turned into a zip pouch. Next, you need to do some what I call squaring up. So you're going to need a ruler, and I'm dealing with a piece here that is 10 inches wide. And what I want to do is I want to wiggle this back and forth until the center of the zipper is at the 5, which is half of 10. So this side looks good. Take a couple pins. Now, depending on how your quilting lines line up, your piece may fight you a little bit. Now we're going to do the same thing to the other end. So 10 inches. And I'm going to say, I think I look pretty good there. So pin this end as well. This end is bowing out a little bit right here, so I'm going to trim that also. So I have a nice square end. Now these pins aren't going to stay here forever. This is just a marking to kind of help the next step so that everything stays lined up and straight. Take this to your iron and press it so that it wants to stay like this, with like that you've got like a more permanent kind of fold right there on those edges. All right, pressed and lined up and squared up best we can, and you need to cut a 2.5 inch square out of the ends of this piece. I happen to have a 2.5 inch ruler. If you don't have a 2.5 inch ruler, I recommend cutting out a piece of cardstock or some heavyweight paper to 2.5 inches square that you can use as a template. And we're just gonna mark the line there. All right, once you're confident that you've got the 2 inches marked out of the corners, then we're gonna cut it. All right, now that's cut, you've got this lovely kind of elongated plus shape. We're gonna unpin this, but before we do that, we are going to flip this over to the back and note the center. Now, it looks like I am lucky enough that I have one of my quilting lines has lined up along the center. That might not be the case for you, but I am still going to mark this. So I know this is my center, meaning this is where the center of that zipper wants to line up to keep all these corners square. All right, so that is marked. Let's unpin it. And keeping the zipper zipped, we are going to flip it wrong side out. Right. Now just seeing, this is why I marked that. There's my mark. I'm just going to line up that mark with the center of the zipper and pin it. Then after you've pinned this first side, reach your hand in the zip bag and unzip your zipper a little bit. It'll make it easier to deal with the next steps. Then we need to pin the other side. The rest of the steps will be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just very simply take this to your machine and stitch along the two sides using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That 1/2 inch seam allowance is so now we need to cover the raw edge, and we're going to do this kind of the same way we did for the ruffle. You're just going to take your folded over binding piece and sew it, and you're just going to sew again with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, or maybe a little bit on the inside of the stitching line you already made. Trim the extra. Now we'll flip it around. And what you want to do is you want to be able to bring this around to cover that existing seam. And once again, we need to use our scissors and grade this seam down. Get some of the bulk out from this foam and extra ruffles so that we can get a nice bound edge. Sure, I might need to trim this one a little bit more. It's hard to tell. It looks good. Yeah, a little bit more on this one. All right, and then if you want to use the glue again, feel free. I am just going to use some binding clips to hold this in place. And I am tugging on this, I'm tugging on the fabric to get it to kind of do what I want it to do. This seam will get, the seam shows on the inside, but it kind of gets pushed into a corner, so you're not going to see it super well. So if this doesn't line up on the back of the piece exactly like you want, don't worry, you're not likely to notice it. All right, I'm just going to sew this. And one tip, if you want to find a way to hold this in place but you're worried about your fingers, use a seam ripper, or I like these little scissors. All right, and it looks pretty good on the other side actually. I'm going to cut this off flush. And then do the same thing to the other end of the bag. All right, there we are in the home stretch. I'm going to show you how to make this little handle for the bag. I've taken a piece of the binding, so we had a lot of binding fabric that I had you cut, more than you probably needed. And I just, since it's already folded in half, if you are using fabric that has a right side and a wrong side, you're going to want to flip it so that the right sides are facing instead of the wrong sides are facing. But in my case, it didn't matter. And you're just going to cut a piece about 8 inches long, and you're going to stitch down the edge of it about 1/8 to 1/4 inch from the edge, and then turn it right side out and press it so that the seam is in the back center. Then we just need to put it in our bag before we complete the next step. So this piece goes inside, kind of facing one of these little bound pieces that we made. It doesn't really matter which side unless you've got a front and back of your bag. You might want to turn it right side out and check it. And you want the right side, so the folded edge is facing out, the right side is facing that sewn bound edge, and it is larger than this piece is wide, and that's intentional. So you have a little bit of kind of some ease with it. I'm just going to pin it. Then we're going to go to your machine and you're just going to sew this. Just sew it just straight over the top of this. And then I think you guys can kind of tell a little bit how the rest of this goes together. So what we're going to do is we're going to pinch the corner so that it lays flat and pin this in place. Again, making this seam go away from that zipper. Alright, I've pinned 2 of them. I'm going to show you on the machine how to sew them, but it's the same for all 4 of them. So let's go over to the machine and finish this up. One of my pinned corners here, and I'm just going to come over to my machine, and we're going to use a 1/2 inch seam allowance again. Definitely want to make sure you backstitch. Alright, that is sewn. Now we need to finish the corner, and we're going to use the same binding technique we've used previously. We're definitely going to have to trim this one, I can tell by looking at it. So sew that piece, and we're going to leave like an inch tail on it, on each end. All right, now we're going to bring it over to this side, and what you're going to do is you're just going to fold it over the same way you did before, but we don't want that to look bad on the end. So I'm going to cut this down to about a 1/2 inch, and I'm going to fold it in first, like so. Then, making sure that this corner stays out of the way, I'm going to fold it over, and I'm going to use a clip to hold that. We'll do the same thing on the other end, and actually we didn't need to trim this one as much as I thought we would. Fold that in. Sorry, hopefully I've got this in the camera, you can see that. Fold that in, making sure this little corner thing kind of stays out of the way, and then fold it over, and binding clip. So you can see folded in and folded over on both sides. We don't have any raw edges showing. And the thing with this is you don't want to sew, you want to try and sew on that line you already stitched on, not on the inside, or it's going to change the shape of your bag. And here I can see a little bit of that stitching line, so I know I'm doing okay. And I'm gonna let this out at the last possible second. And there you can see you have got your bound corner. We've got a lot of cleanup to do, but you need to do the same thing to the other 3 sides, and then you're gonna be done with your bag. All right, all of my corners are finished and sewn. My seams are all finished, and moment of truth. Let's turn it right side out and see what we got. This part is always nerve-wracking, even after sewing for years and years and years. I always get nervous, but I will say there are not very many things that can't be fixed. If you've got a pucker or something, very easy to fix, but it's always nice when you don't have to worry about that kind of thing. All right, we've got my bag right side out, and I feel like we're looking pretty good. We'll zip it up. Now, you may be thinking, oh, it looks kind of puffy. It doesn't look like it's the right shape. So the last thing you want to do is go to your iron, and you can kind of see there is a seam. So you're gonna, on your iron with steam, and you're gonna press your corners. And this flex foam holds its shape really well, and that is what's going to give you this nice squared off shape to your bag. But other than that, I am really happy with it. I think these bags are adorable, oh so useful, would be wonderful gifts for people. I know that my college age girls, I made the prototype, and they're like, oh, that's cute. So I figured that's a good sign. that maybe I'm onto something when the college kids like it. So full instructions with printable instructions can be found at polkadotchair.com. Again, thank you so much for your support. I would appreciate it if you guys would like, comment, and share on the video and subscribe to the channel. And I'd love for you to share the channel with friends who love to sew as well. Until our next project, we'll see you later.